Inflation. Rarely can there be a word that scares more people, especially business owners, but it doesn't have to. Let's talk about inflation and your small business. As a small business owner, we need to be prepared for inflation and other challenges that we might face. Today, I'm going to talk about inflation and how we can survive it and how we can even thrive with inflation. I'm Steve Brady, the Executive Director at the Covation Center, where we focus on helping small businesses, entrepreneurs, micro businesses grow their business in all stages of life and through all sorts of conditions, like inflation. So let's talk about this for a few minutes. First off, what's the definition of inflation? Well, we all know essentially what it is. I'm not an economist. You're not going to get a fancy economic term or definition from me. Inflation really is quite simply when prices go up without any change in the value of the item. Now, you're willing to pay another $500 for something if there's $500 worth of value added to something. That's not inflation. That's value add. Inflation is when things stay the same, but prices don't. What ends up happening is your dollar shrinks. Your dollar buys less of something else. I mean, visually, if you think of it as you could buy $100 worth of stuff for $100, that same $100 next week, next month, next year will maybe buy 80% of whatever that was. That's challenging, and that helps you understand the challenge with inflation. One of the things economists talk about is buying power. So when the dollar shrinks, you have less buying power with your dollars. So that incentivizes your customers to buy more now while they can still get a greater value for the dollar that they have. That might be a good thing, right? I can spend more now and get more with my dollar before prices go up. You've seen those ads. Act now before we have to raise prices. But we're the businesses now, right? We're the businesses that are having to deal with inflation. And so how do we deal with this? What do we need to look at as we as a business look to see how we can move forward? So your customers will find that their dollar will buy less over time. The fact is, it also happens for you. Your dollars buy less, and that means your supplies, you're getting fewer supplies for the same amount of money, or actually, more of your money is going to pay for your supplies, your materials, your labor, all those things that are involved in what you do. It's easy for us to assume that when our costs go up, we just raise our prices, and that ultimately is where we need to go. So what ends up happening is we contribute to inflation because we have to pass on the increased costs. But what we have to do is dig a little deeper in our costs so that we understand the impact inflation is having on us. So we're going to ask you to go back and look at some of the things we always ask you to look at as a small business. As a small business owner, especially sole proprietorships, you need to understand your fixed costs. You need to understand your variable costs. You need to understand your direct and your indirect costs. So that can mean for your business, if let's say you're a coffee roaster or your bakery, your fixed costs are going to be your electric bill, your other utility bills, maybe your rent. Your variable costs would be the costs that go up when you run your ovens or your roaster, the cost of purchasing the flour or the coffee beans. Those are variable costs. Those costs will change differently from one another. Now, one of the things we've heard a lot as we moved into this higher inflationary period is it's transitory, and now they're walking that back. More often than not, what they mean isn't that it's going to go back to the way the prices were 2 years ago. Typically what they mean is it will level off. We're gonna keep climbing, and it's gonna level off to a more reasonable rate of inflation. Some things may go back down, right? Gasoline, you've seen gasoline go up to nearly $4 a gallon and then drop back down to about $2 and then go back up to $4. Most things don't behave that way. So we have to look at this and try to figure out where these things are going. Other costs change seasonally. Your heating oil costs generally go up as we head into heating season. And so there is some seasonality to the price. And so what we would sit down and ask you to do and sit down and work with you is figure out, is there a trend here? Despite the seasonality, is it trending more and more every year? Once you figure out those, once you figure out the increases to your variable costs, the increases to your fixed cost, and they're going to be increasing at different rates. Now you start to look at it and say, okay, what does that actually mean to my overall or my total cost for the product that I'm selling? So some things may go up 30%. Some things may only go up 1%. That doesn't mean 31% is your overall increase in cost. 30% may only account for 2% of your overall cost for your product. And so the impact that will have may be a lot less than the impact of something that went up 5 or 6%. So this is where we would sit down with you, or you can sit down with your spreadsheet and start looking at your costs, the percentage of cost, contribution to the cost for your product. But remember, and I joke around about this, I have a friend who's an economist. He always reminds me, there is no relationship between price and cost. And what he's trying to highlight there is the price is the value that your customers see in the product. Now, generally speaking, customers understand things are getting more expensive. And if you have to raise your price, they will understand that. They may not like it, but they'll understand it. So you need to make sure when you talk to your customers about what's going on, you focus on continuing to provide value to them, that the value of your product hasn't changed. Therefore, you must increase the price. You need to increase the price. You need to make these changes to continue to deliver the value that you've been giving them all this time. Now, there are 3 major areas where we're going to struggle. Things that we look at and scratch our head and try to figure out where we're going with inflation. The first is the actual cost increasing. We just talked about that. Not much we can do when people charge us more for the things that we're buying. I will give you one kind of bonus tip on the side here. If you think it's something where the price has gone up a little bit now, but it's one of those commodities where once supply catches back up to demand, or once demand drops back down and the price will match it, see if you can find an alternative. Here's an example for you. You may have heard about the chip crisis, all these cars not being manufactured because, well, there's no chips. And so Ford and General Motors, they're not making chips. They can't get chips, let alone pay for them. Things were going way out of control on pricing and availability. Well, Tesla did a really tricky thing. They bought different chips and then figured out how to change their software and their firmware to run different chips. So look for alternatives for the things that are getting overpriced for you. As things get more expensive, see if there is a valid and valued alternative. Don't go cheaper, just go less expensive. The second one is a psychological cost that goes with inflation. All of us have watched something we care about go up in price. All of us, if we're honest with ourselves, got a little angry about that. So we understand our customers are going to maybe have some anger, some frustration when they come in to purchase something that they love buying from us and it costs a little bit more. There's nothing they can do about it. Honestly, there's nothing we can do about it. We just need to understand that's there and be prepared to deal with angry customers. Because what happens, there's an indirect cost that inflation carries with it as well. If we don't talk to the customers about the value that we're providing, if we don't focus on that value and focus on how valuable our customers are to us, we will have another indirect cost. We will lose customers and we will lose sales. That's not inflation. That's not just trying to make a little bit more money when you raise the price. That's a serious problem where you're actually losing revenue. Your business is not growing. So pay attention to that. Do everything you can to keep the customers and message as clearly as you can why the prices are changing, that you're not doing this for any reason other than wanting to continue to provide them the valuable product or service that they have come to know and appreciate from you. Here's one more thing, and I'm talking to you, the very small business owner, the micro business owner, the sole proprietorship, or 2 or 3 of you in the store. Remember, everything you're paying more for now and everything your customers are paying more for now, you, as a consumer, are going to also be paying more for. Why do I bring this up? Part of your increased cost has to be your increased labor cost, the increased cost for your labor. At the end of the day, you can't absorb or adjust for all those other prices and then not increase the amount of money you put into the margin for you to pay yourself and your employees. You're not being greedy when you charge a little bit more to pay yourself more, because guess what? It's costing you 10 or 15% more for a piece of beef. It's costing you 10 to 15% more for a loaf of bread. It's costing you 10 or 20% more for chicken. So you have to price that in, because you yourself have become an increased cost to your business, because you need that money to support yourself. It can become a vicious cycle. The best we can do, though, as small businesses, is do what we can to control those costs, do what we can to identify alternatives for the higher costs, and then really strive to continue delivering value to our customer. Said it more than once. That's the most important thing we can do. How do we go through this? Let me talk about it one more time. Identify the costs, figure out what your variable costs are, figure out where your fixed costs are, your direct and your indirect costs. Figure out what each of those products and services that you're purchasing contribute to your overall product or service, so that you know what a 30% increase in one area does compared to a 5% increase in another area. Once you've figured all of that out, use that to make wise decisions about how to increase your price, so that you continue to maintain the margins that you need to continue to be a successful and growing business. And finally, do not forget to pay yourself. Now, we have resources here at the center. One of the resources we use regularly is a book called Profit First. Now, if you don't know about this, and if you don't think about putting profit first in your business, you would do well to pull this book out, order this book, take a look at it, and here's a tip. It's not telling you that profit is above everything else. It's telling you, here's how you be smart to make sure you do the things you need to keep your business profitable, because only profitable businesses survive. It's just a good tool to have. We have a few other books that we refer to quite regularly. Building a Story Brand, talking about how to talk to your customer, how to tell the story about your product. In an era of inflation, you need this ability more than you ever did before to make sure you continue to convey the value that your customer gets from your product, and how they know that there's value for them in what you do and what you provide. There's other books that we use, there's other things that we provide. The Covation Center is your resource. We are here to work with you, to help you go through those numbers we talked about, to help you figure out your strategy. And sometimes what you need to do is figure out that value proposition for your customers again. And we have tools here to help you do that as well, understanding the different types of customers you have and how you segment those out. I'm Steve Brady. It's a pleasure to always be able to talk to you and share these ideas for you. If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe so you can get more of these ideas from me and the other people we have on camera. Don't forget to hit the bell so you know when the next one comes out. And please share it with your friends and family.